TED Talk Slow Version: The Brief History of Dumplings. As archaeologists probe over ancient tombs in Turkmen in western China, they discover some surprisingly well-preserved and familiar relics. Though hardened from 1,000 years, there's a little crescent-shaped dumplings. Exactly who invented dumplings remains a mystery, but some scholars suspect they were first spread around part of ancient world by numerous Turkic peoples living in western China and Central Asia. This is thought to be the case because manki, meaning dumpling or steam bun in many Turkic languages, appear to be the root word for dumpling in several other languages. Ancient Turkic people probably stuffed their dumplings with meat, but it's unclear when its practice began, or whether they learned the art of dumpling making from others. However this happens, dumplings certainly gather steam in ancient China. That's whether they first appeared in the written record more than 1700 years ago and a month-worthy rhapsody by scholar Xu Si. In his poem, Xu alludes to certain cooking methods coming from alien lands. He describes a steamed wheat products as mantou, and he eventually chronicles preparation of kneaded those bowl called labuan. They are packed with pork, mutton, and aromatics, dipped in black meat sauce that quickly gurgle up, leaving people downwind to draw and fantastic feed. Dumpling continues to take off and diversify in China over the next 1,000 years. Instead of traditional meat spilling, some communities opted for vegetarian dumplings. People developed new cooking methods, and because wheat is harder to cultivate outside of northern China, those other regions began making dumplings using rice, tapioca, and sweet potato. The relations between Chinese dumplings and those in other areas is tricky to trace, for food historians have made its best guesses based on very little clues. Turkic tribe spread and eventually establishes an Ottoman Empire around 1300 CE, bringing rough morsels west with them. In what's now Turkey, most people would have stuffed dumplings with pork due to restrictions. Instead, mandi would come to people with ingredients like lamb, dressed with garlic yogurts and melted butter that topped with herbs and spices. Some scholars believe that the Mongol Empire also had the disseminated dumplings, perhaps introduced them to part of Eastern Europe. These dumplings could have come by way of China, or directly from some of the Turkic people the Mongol hired to run their empire. One theory is that this rice is dumpling like Russian hamani as lajpergi and verniki eaten in Poland and Ukraine. Stuffed with things like potato, cabbage, cheese, and cherries, the Mongol Empire also controls Korea, and might have liked introduced dumpling there, where mandu may be eaten with regional ingredients like kimchi. Later, after Chinese dumpling variants were introduced to more countries, English speakers began calling them dumplings. The term means little lumps, and is thought to have first used in 16th century England to describe a dough ball dropped in liquid. Like kumiro and marchable, they would have no filling, so they were actually confusingly imprecise, but it's stuck nonetheless. When Japan occupied China during the Second World War, Chinese jiaozi were brought to Japan, where they in turn became known as gyoza. They were more typically pan-fried. So what about the fact that every region in Italy has its own variety of dumpling-like stuffed pasta? Some historians think that Arab conquerors brought dumplings when they risen by Sicily between 9th and 11th centuries. But the story is still out. It's unlikely that all dumpling as a condition came from the same roots tradition, and in many cases, it might simply be that culinary visionaries from different cultures shared a similar revelation. That cooking feeling in casings, though, would be delightful either way. We can appreciate these plump packets of perfection and the tangled, mysterious historical web that's made dumpling so diverse and divine. As archaeologists pored over ancient tombs in Turkey in western China, they discovered some surprisingly well-preserved and familiar relics. Though hardened from 1,000 years, they sell ludicrously cheap dumplings. Exactly who invented dumplings remains a mystery, but some scholars suspect they were first spread around part of the ancient world by nomadic Turkic people living in western China and some Asia. This is thought to be the case because manti, meaning dumpling or steamed bun in many Turkic languages, appear to be the root they were for dumpling in several other languages. Ancient Turkic people probably stuffed their dumplings with meat, but it's unclear when this practice began, or whether they learned the art of dumpling making from others. However this happens, dumplings certainly gathered steam in ancient China. That's where they first appear in the written record, more than 1700 years ago, and a mouth-watering rhapsody by scholar Sushi. In his poem, Xu alludes to certain cooking methods coming from alien lands. He describes steamed wheat products as mantou and is reverently chronicled the preparation of kneaded dough bowl called lawen. They are packed with pork, mutton, and aromatics, dipped in black mix sauce that quickly goggles up, leaving people downwind to draw and fantastic feats. Dumpling continued to take off in diversity in China over the next 1,000 years. Instead of traditional meat filling, some communities opted for vegetarian dumplings. People developed new cooking methods, and because wheat is hard to cultivate outside of northern China, those in other regions began making dumplings using rice, tapioca, and sweet potato. The relation between Chinese dumplings and those in other areas is tricky to trace, but food historians have made their best guesses based on available clues. Turkey tries spread and eventually establishes the Ottoman Empire around 1300 CE, bringing rough Moses west with them. In what's now Turkey, most people would have stuffed dumplings with pork due to smart restrictions. Instead, mandi would come to be filled with ingredients like lamb, dishes with garlic yogurt and melted butter, then topped with herbs and spices. Some scholars believe that the Mongol Empire also had these many as dumplings, perhaps introduced them to part of Eastern Europe. These dumplings could have come by way of China, or directly from some of the Turkic people what Mongol hired to run their empire. One theory is that this gave was dumpling like Russian hamani and the Lazarus and Vernitsky eaten in pouring Ukraine, stuffed with things like potato, cabbage, cheese, and cherry. The Mongol Empire also controls Korea, and might have likewise introduced dumpling there, or mandu, may be eaten with regional ingredients like kimchi. Later, after Chinese dumpling varieties were introduced to more countries, English speakers began calling them dumplings. The term means little lumps, and is thought to have the first use in 16th century England. It describes a dough ball drop in liquid. Like noodle and martable, they would have had no filling, so the word actually confusing and imprecise, but it stuck nonetheless. When Japan occupied China during the Second World War, Chinese daozi were brought to Japan, where they in turn became known as gyoza and were more typically pan-fried. So what about the fact that every region in Italy has its own variety of dumpling like stuffed pasta? Some historians think that Arab conquerors brought dumplings when they reigned over Sicily between the 9th and 11th centuries, but the jury's still out. It's unlikely that all dumpling as dishes came from the same root tradition. In many cases, it may simply be that culinary visionaries from different cultures shared a similar revelation. That cooking feeling encased in dough would be delightful. Either way, we can appreciate this plump pocket of perfection and the tangle's mysterious historical web has made dumplings so diverse and divine.